In this lesson, we're going to look at a full client against the REST-style predictions2 service. Before I explain the working file that you see on the screen, that's perlout.txt, let me clarify what I mean by a full client. All of the clients so far have been very short Perl scripts, some of them packaged together to do a series of tests, and Perl is excellent for preliminary testing of RESTful web services, but curl is also limited. Curl is able to send out any of the CRUD requests, but when it gets back a response, curl by itself does not have the power, for example, to parse an XML or a JSON response. For that, we need a more powerful tool, a client written in a standard programming language. I'm picking Perl just for convenience, but Ruby, Python, C, and even Java would be just fine. I'm picking non-Java quite deliberately because web services are supposed to be language neutral. So this is a chance to illustrate that point. We have the predictions2 service written in Java and a client against that service written in a non-Java language. Let me now turn to the working file. The Perl client runs a series of tests. It does all of the CRUD tests that we've seen before. It requests XML payloads, JSON payloads. It does get all. It does get one. We're interested in the XML responses from the service. And in particular, one of those responses is a single XML document that contains all of the predictions. We've seen that document earlier. We don't care so much about the details right now. The point of interest is this. The Perl client parses that document and extracts the information of interest. And in this case, the information of interest for each of the 32 predictions is, first, the ID, so those are the integer values you see on the left, and then the who, so Cornelius Tillman is the first who, then an arrow followed by the what. The document you see is plain text, but it's not downloaded that way from the service. Instead, it's extracted via an XML parse. Let's turn now to the code that does the parsing. So this working file is called predictionsclient.txt. It's a fragment of the full client. The full client is called predictionsclient.pl, and it's ready to go if you have Perl and the required libraries. Let me get to the details. At line 1, you see a function. In Perl, it's a subroutine, but it's a function called getTest, and this is basically a getAll request. The predictions2 service is going to return an XML document that contains all of the predictions. When the response is received, getTest calls handleResponse. You see this at line 2. And the second argument to handleResponse is a pointer to another function called parseXML. ParseXML is what does the heavy lifting. So let's move down to that guy right away. At line 3, I'm using the XML XPath library that comes with Perl. Virtually every modern programming language has this library, or the equivalent. XPath is a standard part of XML. Basically, what it does under the hood is a tree-based parse. The outcome of that parse is a tree structure. XPath is then able to search that tree and extract elements that are desired. That extraction, in this case, occurs in lines 4, 5, and 6. And the basic idea in each of these is each of these searches returns a list. So, for example, at line 4, this extraction returned a list of IDs. Line 5 returns a list of the who's, the authors of the predictions. And line 6 returns a list of the predictions themselves. Line 7 is just a standard Perl loop that iterates across each of those lists and prints out per prediction, ID, who, what. So let me go back, refresh our view of what the output is from that while loop. Now let me go back to the Perl code for one last point. The idea here is that once the response is received from a successful request, the work has just started. And the first part of that work is typically a parse or the equivalent. So we see that in Perl. We'll see that again later in Java and even later in JSON. But this is now a more realistic client, more realistic than the curl clients we've seen so far, because it's got to do some down and dirty work, in this case, XML parsing.